Vast and luminous treasury of Jewish mystical tradition, few works shimmer with the same enigmatic radiance as the Sefer Raziel Hamelach, the Book of Raziel the Angel, that legendary compendium of angelic alphabets, ineffable names, and the arcane of creation whispered to Adam in the moments after his expulsion from Eden, when the bitter taste of exile had just settled upon the lips of humanity, and the light of paradise was withdrawn, leaving man in shadow and confusion, yearning for the memory of divine intimacy. And so it is said that Raziel, the angel of secrets who stands nearest to the throne and listens to the speech of the Eternal, descended like a living scroll of fire and delivered to Adam a book written in letters of flame and mystery, a book that contained the structures of the heavens, the rotations of the stars, the names that bind angels to their courses, the alphabets through which creation was woven, and the formulae by which the soul may ascend once again to behold the face of its maker. And in this mythic gesture one finds the essence of the Sefer Raziel Hamelach. It is not merely a book, it is the condensation of divine wisdom into signs and syllables, a ladder composed of sacred alphabets, each letter not a mere vessel of sound but a cosmic force, an archetypal root from which streams of light issue into the world. And thus the alphabet of Raziel is said to be more primordial than the Hebrew of Moses, more subtle than the letters of the Torah, for it is composed of shifting glyphs, angelic runes, secret sigils that are as much images as they are utterances, each one containing within itself whole universes of resonance, and to gaze upon them is to pierce the membrane between the visible and the invisible. For the Sefer Raziel unfolds itself as a tapestry woven out of layers upon layers of esoteric knowledge. At its heart lies the alphabet, or rather the alphabets, for within its folios are preserved multiple scripts, celestial alphabets that echo the writing of the Sefer themselves, strange characters said to predate the giving of the Torah on Sinai, alphabets that were whispered into the ears of the patriarchs, prophets, transmitted in dream and vision, encoded in diagrams that look like constellations mapped into letters, and in these alphabets the seeker finds the very patterns of divine creation, for each symbol is a bridge between speech and being, each stroke and axis connect heaven and earth, and the names that are generated by their combinations are themselves like living creatures, angels of language who stand as guardians at the thresholds of knowledge, each name vibrating with a power that may heal or wound, open or close, reveal or conceal, depending on the purity of the heart that pronounces it. The Book of Raziel therefore is more than instruction, it is initiation, for to engage its alphabet is to enter into a current of vision that stretches back to Adam, forward to Solomon, sideways into the magical traditions of late antiquity and into the ecstatic practices of medieval Kabbalah, where adepts trace these letters in the air with their fingers, carve them into amulets, engrave them into rings, and place them at the head of their beds to receive dreams of illumination. For Raziel's alphabet was thought to be a key to angelic communication, a cipher that unlocks the gates of the seven heavens, allowing the soul to traverse the palaces of fire and water, to behold the angelic hosts, who guard the mysteries of the throne, and to stand unconsumed before the brilliance of the Shekinah. In contemplating the alphabet of Raziel, one must recognize that it is not an alphabet in the profane sense, not merely a code of arbitrary symbols for phonetic sound, but rather a revelation of the very structure of existence. For the Kabbalists taught that the world itself was created through letters, that the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet are the vessels of divine emanation, the channels through which the infinite contracted itself into the finite, and yet, surrounding these 22 are other alphabets, angelic scripts of Raziel, which shimmer like shadows and reflections of the primordial tongue. The extensions and permutations that reveal subtler shades of divine energy, and within Sefer Raziel Hamelach, these alphabets are given to the seeker not as curiosities, but as tools of alignment, meditative diagrams by which the soul may attune itself to the supernal frequencies that resonate through creation, and each sigil is like a tuning fork that, when contemplated or inscribed, harmonizes the lower world with the upper. Thus, the Book of Raziel contains not only alphabets, but also long lists of divine names, secret combinations of the tetragrammaton, expansions of the 72 names, angelic appellations that correspond to the zodiac, to the hours of the day and night, to the seasons, to the winds, to the rivers, to the limbs of the human body, for all of creation is mirrored in names, and to know the name is to touch the essence of the thing itself. And Raziel, as the angel of divine knowledge, reveals in his book a map of names so vast that it becomes a universe of speech, a galaxy of syllables wherein the seeker may wander as if among stars, discovering that each divine name is not simply a word but a door, a gate that leads into chambers of divine light. And the alphabets are the keys to these gates, for without knowledge of the proper script, the names remain sealed, like jewels locked in a casket whose lock may only be turned by the correct sigil. When one meditates upon the book of Raziel, one must imagine Adam sitting outside the garden, gazing at the flaming sword that barred the way back, and in his hands the book, its letters shimmering like embers, each glyph flickering between form and formlessness, and as Adam traced the lines with his eyes, he began to perceive the hidden orders of the cosmos, how the stars move in relation to the angels, how the winds carry the breath of God across the face of the waters, how the herbs contain within them sparks of healing that may be awakened by the pronunciation of a certain name, how the days and nights are woven together through the permutations of letters, and so Adam, though exiled, was not abandoned, for Raziel gave him the alphabet of return, an alphabet that would allow his descendants to pierce through the veils of separation and rediscover the intimacy of Eden, not in space but in consciousness, not by re-entering garden with their bodies but by ascending inwardly through the letters to the archetypal garden of the soul. The medieval Kabbalists who received the Sefer Raziel Hamelach recognized in it a synthesis of earlier traditions. From the Merkava mystics it inherited the practice of chanting and visualizing divine names. From the Sefer Yetzirah it inherited the notion of letters as creative forces. From magical traditions it incorporated practical instructions for amulets and charms. But at its center it remained the Book of Raziel, a transmission of the angel who stands in God's counsel, and so the alphabets it contains are not human inventions, but angelic inscriptions, alien to the eye, yet strangely familiar to the soul, for the soul remembers these letters from before its descent into the body, when it still hovered in the treasury of souls and beheld the letters as sparks of divine fire swirling around the throne. And when the seeker studies them now, it is less a learning than a remembering, less a discovery than a return. And thus the alphabet of Raziel, as presented in the book, functions as both mirror and ladder. A mirror, because it reflects the divine architecture within the mind of the contemplative, revealing that the human intellect is itself patterned after the celestial alphabet, and a ladder because it offers a means of ascent, a way of climbing back toward the source by aligning one's thought, speech, and imagination with the supernal glyphs that are inscribed in the heavens. To meditate upon these letters is to feel them vibrating in the body, in the bones, in the breath, and to realize that the human being is itself a living scroll, each limb and organ corresponding to a letter, each heartbeat echoing the rhythm of divine speech. And when one attains this realization, the alphabet ceases to be an object external to the seeker and becomes the very texture of the self, and at that moment the secrets of creation open, like a flower, revealing their fragrance to the soul. The seeker persists in contemplation, tracing the letters of Raziel in the silence of the heart. Then the alphabets begin to rearrange themselves inwardly, becoming not static images but living forms, shifting like fire, flowing like water, flickering between shapes as if to remind the mind that creation is not a frozen edifice but an eternal active speaking, a ceaseless utterance of divine breath, and the alphabets are the traces of this breath made visible, glyphs that record the currents of the ineffable voice, and so to look upon them is to listen, to see is to hear, and to chant their names is to enter into the rhythm of the cosmos itself. Raziel is not simply the angel of secrets in the abstract, but the angel who carries the resonance of God's speech, and in the alphabets of his book we are invited to partake in that resonance, to let our own tongues and minds be shaped by the forms that gave rise to heaven and earth. And so the alphabet of Raziel is a teacher as well as a revelation, guiding the aspirant in how to think, how to breathe, how to perceive, until one no longer sees the world as profane matter but as script, as sacred writing, every stone a letter, every tree a word, every star a sentence in the endless book of creation. The lists of angelic names that accompany these alphabets in Sefer Raziel Hamelach further deepen the mystery, for they demonstrate how letters, once combined, become powers, and powers, once named, become presences, and presences, when invoked, become guides, protectors, healers, or challengers on the path of ascent. And Raziel reveals that the letters are not simply inert symbols but seeds that blossom into angels, so that each angel is a name and each name is a condensation of letters, and each letter is itself a spark of divine energy. And so when the adept studies the book, tracing the alphabets, pronouncing the names, engraving the sigils, he is not simply learning about angels, he is creating the conditions for their appearance, weaving them out of speech and intention, bringing them into presence, and in this sense the Sefer Raziel is both cosmology and liturgy, both map and ritual, both theology and theurgy, for to study it is to do it, to perform it, to enter into the act of divine speech as participant rather than observer. This intertwining of alphabet and name, of glyph and angel, reveals the deeper principle that underlies Raziel's book, that creation itself is linguistic, that the universe is not made of matter at its root but of meaning, not of atoms, but of letters, and that these letters exist not only in the visible Hebrew script, but also in subtler alphabets revealed to those who stand close to the throne, alphabets of fire, of light, of shadow, of water, each corresponding to a different level of creation, and the Sefer Raziel preserves glimpses of these in its diagrams and charts, fragments of the celestial library that were gifted to humanity so that we might reorient ourselves in exile. And though much is concealed, what is revealed is sufficient to awaken remembrance, to ignite the longing that drives the soul upward through the palaces of heaven. One of the most striking features of the Sefer Raziel Hamelach is its insistence on the practical dimension of this knowledge. The alphabets and names are not only for meditation but also for protection, for healing, for the crafting of amulets that shield the bearer from harm, for the summoning of angels who guide journeys, for the sanctification of spaces against destructive forces, and so the alphabet is not abstract but operative, the very form of divine letters inscribed on parchment, metal, or wax, serving as a channel through which the energy of the name flows into the world. And thus the book becomes both a contemplative ladder and a manual of sacred technology, teaching that the divine alphabets are not confined to vision but may be embodied in matter, inscribed into the fabric of everyday life, embedding within the garments of exile a thread of Edenic light. This duality, contemplative ascent in practical operation, mirrors the dual role of Raziel himself, for as tradition tells, he is both the angel closest to the throne of God, who hears the secrets of creation directly from the mouth of the Almighty, and also the angel who brings these secrets down to earth, who dares to bridge the gap between heaven and man, who hands to Adam the book that will preserve the covenant of wisdom through the generations. Raziel is both the guardian of the highest mysteries and the mediator of their descent, both hidden and revealed, both luminous and veiled, and the alphabets he gives likewise embody this paradox, being at once alien and intimate, incomprehensible to the rational mind yet strangely recognizable to the soul, a script we feel we should already know, as if we had written it ourselves before birth, and now, upon seeing it again, we remember. The tradition holds that this book of Raziel was handed down through the patriarchs, preserved by Noah during the flood, studied by Abraham in his quest to know the order of the heavens, transmitted to Solomon, who used it to master the spirits and build the temple, and eventually hidden away until rediscovered in the medieval world, where it was copied, commented upon, and adapted, and in this chain of transmission one perceives the role of the alphabet as a thread that binds generations together, a continuity of wisdom carried not in monuments of stone but in the ephemeral yet enduring form of letters, ink on parchment, and more deeply, thought on breath, intention on vibration. The alphabet as the most portable of temples, carried in the mind and heart wherever the people wandered, an eternal portable sanctuary of wisdom. It is said that within Sefer Raziel Hamelach are encoded the secrets of the natural world, the properties of herbs, the influences of stars, the cycles of time, and that all of these are linked back to the alphabets and names, for to know the right letter is to know the essence of a plant, to know the right name is to unlock the power of a constellation, and so the book presents the cosmos as a vast network of correspondences, all anchored in language, all bound by the speech of God as refracted through the letters of Raziel's alphabet, and this is why the study of the book was considered both dangerous and sacred, for one who mispronounces a name may unbalance forces, one who misuses a letter may summon energies unprepared for, and so the initiates approached the book with awe, often under guidance of a teacher, fasting and purifying themselves before opening its pages, so that the encounter with its alphabets would not be a casual act of curiosity but a ritual of consecration. As the seeker delves deeper, the alphabets themselves begin to disclose layers of symbolism. Certain letters resemble stars, others resemble flames, still others appear as serpents, rivers, or ladders, and each form invites meditation on the archetype it embodies, so that one letter may teach about the flow of divine energy from above to below, another may reveal the cyclical nature of time, another may remind the contemplative of the balance between mercy and judgment, and so the alphabet becomes a school of images as well as sounds, a visionary iconography that instructs the soul through symbol as much as through meaning, and the adept who contemplates them may begin to see the same patterns appearing in dreams, in the shapes of clouds, in the cracks of stones, until the whole world becomes an extension of Raziel's alphabet, a grand text that is constantly being written by the hand of God before our eyes. The ultimate aim of engaging with the Sefer Raziel Hamelach, however, is not mere knowledge for its own sake, nor even the acquisition of magical power, but rather the reintegration of the soul with its divine source, the healing of the rift of exile, the restoration of intimacy with the Creator, and the alphabets are the means of this reintegration, for by contemplating them, pronouncing them, inscribing them, the soul gradually realigns itself with the original speech of God, the speech that brought it into being, and in this alignment, a veil of separation grows thin, and moments of illumination occur, moments when the soul tastes again the light of Eden, and knows itself not as a wanderer lost in a darkened world but as a spark of divine fire, eternal and radiant, embraced by the wisdom of the infinite, and in that moment the alphabet of Raziel ceases to be an external artifact and becomes the very pulse of one's being, for the true book of Raziel is not parchment but soul, not ink but spirit, not letters written in space but the very letters out of which consciousness itself is woven. The wisdom contained within the alphabet of Raziel is not static, not a dead archive of forgotten symbols, but an ever-living stream of revelation, flowing from the throne of God through the angelic hierarchies down into the hearts of those who open themselves to its current, and in this way the Sefer Raziel Hamelach is less a book that one reads than a river one enters, and the alphabets are like stones and ripples along its course, each glyph altering the flow of light in subtle but decisive ways, and the names are like eddies and whirlpools where divine power concentrates, and if one immerses fully, with sincerity and awe, the waters wash away the crust of forgetfulness and awaken the primordial memory of the soul, the memory of having stood once before the face, of having heard the unmediated speech of the eternal, and though now clothed in the garments of time and body, that memory remains the anchor of the soul's longing, and the alphabet of Raziel is the key that unlocks it, for by meditating upon those letters, one tunes the inner ear to the echoes of that first speech, hearing again the vibrations that shaped heaven and earth. The Kabbalists spoke of the Torah as black fire on white fire, an endless scroll written before the creation of the world, and in Raziel's alphabet we glimpse fragments of that primal scroll, not in the familiar square script of later Hebrew but in forms that precede history, that shimmer between pictogram and sound, between sign and flame, as though we are being shown the raw elements of language before they congealed into cultural form, the molten script of creation itself, and in contemplating these letters the adept discovers that human speech is but an echo of divine speech, human alphabets but shadows of angelic alphabets, and that every utterance, however mundane, contains within it sparks of the infinite word. The angelic alphabets found within the Sefer Raziel Hamelach are often depicted as secret ciphers, sometimes resembling geometric patterns, sometimes curling like serpentine shapes, sometimes resembling constellations drawn in the night sky, and these visual forms are not arbitrary but are said to correspond to channels of divine energy, to the paths that link Sephirot to Sephirot in the tree of life, to the trajectories of the stars across the heavens, and to the hidden anatomy of the soul, so that each glyph resonates on multiple levels at once: cosmological, angelological, psychological, and spiritual, and by meditating upon them, the adept harmonizes the inner and outer worlds, aligning the microcosm with the macrocosm, the body with the cosmos, the soul with divine, and it is for this reason that many manuscripts of the book contain elaborate diagrams, circles, and grids in which the alphabets are arranged, for these are not mere decorations but maps, maps of ascent, maps of invocation, maps of creation itself, and trace them with the eyes or with the hand is to rehearse the movements of the divine breath as it shaped the worlds. One of the mysteries hinted at in the book is the notion that these alphabets are not singular, but plural, that there is not one angelic script but many, each suited to a different order of angels, a different level of creation, a different aspect of divine revelation, and so Raziel reveals not one alphabet, but several, each with its own distinct form and resonance, and in this plurality we perceive the inexhaustibility of divine language, the impossibility of containing it within a single system, for the speech of God is infinite, and what we receive are only facets, glimpses refracted through the prism of angelic mediation, yet even these fragments are enough to overwhelm the intellect, to dazzle the heart, to ignite the soul, and so the alphabets of Raziel are like sparks from a greater fire, fragments of a shattered whole, each carrying within it the potency of the original flame, and to gather them, to contemplate them, to combine them in names and invocations, is to begin the work of tikkun, the repair of the broken vessels, the reweaving of the cosmic text torn in the catastrophe of creation, and thus the study of Raziel's alphabet becomes not only an act of learning but an act of cosmic healing, a participation in the restoration of harmony. The divine names that populate the book are built from these alphabets, and they serve as bridges between the visible and invisible worlds, each name like a rung in a ladder, each permutation a step upward toward the throne, and in chanting them the adept enters into resonance with the angels themselves, for every angel is bound to its name, every angel is its name, and to pronounce it with purity and intention is to summon its presence, to call it into nearness, and thus the book provides not only abstract lists but practical methods for engaging these names, instructions for when to pronounce them, for what purposes, for which hours of the day, under which astrological conditions, and here we see again the dual character of the Sefer Raziel. It is both contemplative and operative, mystical and magical, theoretical and practical, and it refuses to separate these dimensions, for in the worldview of the book, to know is to do, to contemplate is to act, and the alphabet itself is both a vision of heaven and a tool for shaping earth. This intertwining of heaven and earth is perhaps most vividly expressed in the notion that Raziel gave his book to Adam as a guide for survival in exile, a manual for navigating the harsh conditions outside Eden, teaching him not only how to pray and ascend but also how to heal, how to protect himself from harm, how to attune to the rhythms of time, how to use herbs and stones in concert with divine names, and thus the alphabet becomes a bridge between the sublime and the mundane, between the throne and the soil, between the angelic and the human, and this integration is what makes the Sefer Raziel so compelling, for it demonstrates that the highest mysteries are not divorced from daily life but permeate it, that the alphabets of angels are not locked away in heaven but are inscribed in the shapes of leaves, in the patterns of rivers, in the courses of the stars, and that, by attuning to them, one may live in harmony with creation even in exile, transforming exile itself into a site of revelation. As the medieval mystics copied and studied the Sefer Raziel, they often did so with rituals of sanctification, fasting, immersing in purifying waters, lighting candles, reciting psalms, for they recognized that to engage with the alphabet of Raziel was to enter sacred territory, to risk encountering powers beyond one's control, and thus they prepared themselves as priests entering the sanctuary, and in doing so they acknowledged that the alphabets were not inert diagrams, but living presences, fiery letters, that could bless or burn depending on the purity of the vessel that received them, and so the tradition developed around the book is one of reverence and caution, awe and trembling, for the alphabet of Raziel is the alphabet of creation, and to touch it carelessly is to touch the foundations of the cosmos without protection. The depth of this awe can be felt in the way later Kabbalists spoke of the Sefer Raziel as a book of light, a book of fire, a book that could not be fully comprehended by human intellect but only glimpsed through vision and dream, and they recounted stories of sages who, after meditating upon its alphabets, were granted visions of angels, of the heavenly palaces, of the structure of the cosmos, and in some accounts, even of the primordia, Torah itself, and so the book became not merely a text, but a threshold, a doorway through which the soul might pass into realms of supernal knowledge. Guided by the angel Raziel, who whispers secrets in the night to those prepared to hear, the seeker who persists in this path comes to realize that the alphabets are not only external, but also internal, that the true letters of Raziel are inscribed in the soul itself, that every human being carries within them the echo of the divine speech that brought them into being, and that to study the alphabets of Raziel is ultimately to study the alphabet of one's own being, to rediscover the letters that compose one's soul, the names that shape one's destiny, the glyphs that align one's path with the divine will, and when this realization dawns, the boundary between book and reader dissolves, and one sees that the Sefer Raziel is not simply an external object handed down through tradition, but is the very structure of consciousness, the very script by which the soul was written, and to awaken to this is to step once more into Eden, not as a place of geography but as a state of awareness, a state of communion with the divine alphabet that is the source of all. The seeker plunges deeper into the river of Raziel's revelation. The recognition grows that the alphabets themselves are modes of vision, for just as the prophets beheld the chariot of fire, wheels within wheels, and strange creatures covered in eyes, so too the student of Raziel beholds letters within letters, alphabets within alphabets, each unfolding into further complexities, spiraling into geometries that suggest infinite depth, and here the contemplative realizes that the alphabet is not a static set of characters, but a living organism, a fractal of divine intelligence, in which every line, curve, and intersection participates in a greater harmony, and so to gaze upon a single glyph is to open a window into infinity, to perceive how one stroke resonates across worlds, connecting the highest archangels to the innermost motions of the human heart. And this recognition is overwhelming, for the intellect cannot contain it, yet the soul delights in it, drinking from the spring of meaning that flows ceaselessly through the alphabets of Raziel. Indeed, one begins to understand why tradition says that this book was given to Adam immediately after his exile, for without it he would have been utterly lost, cast into a wilderness of chaos and despair, unable to discern the presence of God in the fallen world, but with it he could trace the patterns of divine speech still shimmering in creation. He could remember that exile is not abandonment, but concealment, that behind the veil the same word continues to sustain all things. And thus the alphabets became for him, and for us, a map of hope, a chart of return, a promise inscribed in letters that no exile can erase. The interplay between the alphabets and the ineffable names in Sefer Raziel Hamelach is one of the book's most profound mysteries, for names are the articulation of letters, the weaving of glyphs into utterance, and when arranged in certain sequences, they unlock particular currents of divine energy, summoning specific angelic presences, or harmonizing the soul with specific aspects of creation, and so the book contains lists upon lists of names, some familiar expansions of the tetragrammaton, others strange, built from obscure permutations, and each set of names corresponds to a particular function. One set for protection from demons, another for safe travel, another for healing, another for gaining wisdom, another for aligning with the stars, and all of them are linked back to the alphabets, for without the script one cannot inscribe the name correctly, and without the name the letter remains potential rather than power, and thus the alphabet and the name form a unity, a dance of form and sound, vessel and content, image and voice, each incomplete without the other, each yearning for the other, and in their union the hidden energies of creation flow into the world. In this way, the Sefer Raziel presents itself as both a record of divine wisdom and a manual of angelic theurgy, teaching the adept how to use letters and names to bridge the gap between heaven and earth, how to inscribe amulets that protect the home, how to recite invocations that open the inner eye, how to combine alphabets into seals that resonate with particular angelic hierarchies, and yet always the book reminds that such operations are dangerous if approached without purity, that the names are not mere tools for human manipulation but living presences to be approached with reverence, and that the alphabets themselves are fiery and may consume the unworthy, and thus the entire text is suffused with awe, warning, and sanctity, reminding us that to touch the alphabet of Raziel is to touch the very bones of creation. The tradition of the angelic alphabets is also linked to the broader Kabbalistic vision of the Sephirot and the Tree of Life, for each letter is said to correspond to a channel between Sephirot and the alphabets of Raziel preserve alternative arrangements of these channels, hidden paths that ordinary Hebrew does not disclose, and in this sense the alphabets are like secret maps of the tree, revealing currents of divine energy that flow beneath the surface of the known system, and to meditate upon them is to walk those hidden paths, to explore chambers of the soul and of the cosmos that are ordinarily inaccessible. And so the alphabets are not only tools of invocation but also diagrams of mystical geography, blueprints of the inner worlds, invitations to journey through the vast palace of God's creation. There is also in the Sefer Raziel a profound integration of cosmology and angelology, for the alphabets and names are tied not only to divine attributes but also to the structures of the heavens, to the zodiac, to the planets, to the courses of the sun and moon, to the divisions of time into hours and days, to the four elements and the seasons, and thus the book presents creation as a vast linguistic system, a cosmic liturgy in which every motion of the heavens is a letter, every hour of the day a syllable, every year a word, and to study the book is to learn how to read this cosmic liturgy. How to perceive time itself as sacred speech, how to align one's actions with the rhythms of divine utterance, and in this alignment to find harmony and protection. The alphabets are thus not merely visual ciphers, but temporal guides, teaching the seeker when to act, when to pray, when to invoke, when to rest, mapping time as much as space, revealing that the cosmos is a scroll being written continually, and that the human task is to read and respond. The secrecy surrounding the Sefer Raziel is itself telling, for the book was often restricted to initiates, copied in guarded circles, sometimes accompanied by instructions not to reveal its contents to the unworthy, and this reflects the recognition that the alphabets are not for all eyes, that their power can be misused or misunderstood, and indeed many stories tell of those who attempted to wield the book for selfish gain and were destroyed by its fire, while those who approached with humility and awe were blessed with wisdom and protection. And this polarity reflects the very nature of divine names themselves, which can bless or curse, heal or wound depending on the intention with which they are uttered. And so the alphabet of Raziel is a mirror, revealing the state of the soul that contemplates it, magnifying purity into light and arrogance into darkness. The medieval commentaries on the Sefer Raziel reveal that its influence spread widely, inspiring not only Jewish mystics, but also Christian magicians and hermeticists, who translated and adapted portions of the text, fascinated by its alphabets and names, seeing in them universal keys to the mysteries of creation, and thus Raziel's book became part of the broader current of Western esotericism, its alphabets appearing in grimoires, its names invoked in rituals, its diagrams copied into magical circles, and though often distorted or misunderstood, these transmissions nonetheless testify to the enduring magnetism of Raziel's revelation, for the human soul, regardless of tradition, longs to know the speech by which it was made, longs to trace the letters of its origin, longs to hear again the echo of the voice that called it into being, and the alphabet of Raziel satisfies that longing, at least in part, by offering glimpses of the divine script. Yet the deepest teaching of the Sefer Raziel ha-Malak is not in the external alphabets, nor even in the external names, but in the recognition that these letters and names point inward, toward the alphabet inscribed in the heart, toward the name whispered into the soul before birth, toward the hidden book that each of us carries within, and thus the study of Raziel's alphabet becomes a mirror practice, a way of discovering oneself as a fragment of the divine word, living letter in the cosmic scroll, as a spark of speech in the infinite dialogue between creator and creation, and to awaken to this is to realize that exile itself is but the forgetting of our letterhood, and redemption is the remembrance of it, the recognition that we are not separate from the alphabet, but are the alphabet, not separate from the book but are the book, not separate from Raziel but are ourselves angelic messengers inscribed with mysteries to be revealed in the fullness of time. The seeker, immersed in the luminous stream of Raziel's teaching, begins to understand that the alphabets themselves are not fixed relics but fluid revelations, that they appear differently to each soul according to its capacity, that to the beginner they may look like strange marks on a page, to the advanced like radiant geometries, and to the saint like living flames dancing before the throne, and this variability is itself a sign of their divinity, for the letters of Raziel are mirrors that adapt themselves to the gaze of the beholder, veiling or unveiling according to the vessel that receives them, and thus the same alphabet may yield simple protection to one person and profound mystical union to another, and in this the justice of heaven is revealed, for the divine gives to each according to their readiness, neither withholding what the soul can bear nor overwhelming it with what it cannot. And so the alphabets function as spiritual tests, initiatory thresholds that reveal the true state of the heart, and this is why tradition holds that Adam, upon first receiving the book, could not understand it fully, but only through years of meditation and prayer did its letters begin to disclose their meaning, and even then, much remained hidden, for the alphabet is infinite, inexhaustible, as infinite as the word itself. Within the Sefer Raziel ha-Malak, the alphabets are often linked to angelic hierarchies, so that one set of letters belongs to the order of the seraphim, another to the cherubim, another to the thrones, and each alphabet thus embodies not only sound and form but also presence and function, and in contemplating them one enters into communion with the angels themselves, for the letters are their bodies, their garments, their songs, and to study the alphabet is to converse with the angels, to enter into their language, to sing their hymns, and this explains why so many of the names in the book are built from the alphabets, for the angels themselves are names given form, and their power is bound to their pronunciation, and their presence is carried in their letters, and so to invoke them is to arrange the letters in their proper order, to trace the alphabet of their being, and thereby to make visible what is normally invisible, to bring into nearness what is usually distant. And in this act one discovers that the veil between human and angel is thinner than it seems, that language itself is the bridge, that the alphabet is the ladder Jacob saw in his dream, with angels ascending and descending upon it, and that to climb this ladder is simply to arrange the letters with purity and intention, to speak the names with reverence, to let the alphabets resound in the chambers of the heart. The alphabets of Raziel are also deeply tied to the mysteries of creation, for in the Kabbalistic view, creation is not a once-for-all event, but a continual process of divine speech and ongoing utterance in which the worlds are sustained from moment to moment, and the alphabets are the building blocks of this speech, the primal letters out of which God weaves reality, and thus the study of Raziel's alphabet is a study of being itself, of the laws and patterns by which the cosmos is maintained, and to grasp even a fragment of this is to understand how the divine breath animates all things, how the stars move in harmony with the letters, how the elements combine in response to syllables, how the soul itself is breathed into the body by the articulation of a hidden name. And so the seeker who meditates upon the alphabet is not merely reading symbols but is listening to the very heartbeat of creation, hearing the pulse of divine language that sustains existence. This is why the Sefer Raziel Hamelach is filled with lists of correspondences, letters aligned with herbs, names aligned with stars, alphabets aligned with seasons and hours, for the entire cosmos is presented as a vast network of linguistic resonances, every part bound to every other through the alphabet of God, and to study these correspondences is to learn how to live in harmony with the speech of the cosmos, how to act in tune with divine rhythm, how to invoke healing not by opposing nature but by aligning with its hidden language, how to protect oneself not by resisting fate but by synchronizing with the alphabet of providence, and in this way the book teaches a way of life, a path of attunement, a discipline of listening to the world as one listens to scripture, hearing in every rustle of leaves, every movement of stars, every whisper of wind the letters of Raziel's alphabet still speaking. The transmission of this book across generations reveals its sacred weight, for it was said to have passed from Adam to Noah, who used it to guide the building of the ark and to navigate the floodwaters, then to Abraham, who employed it in his meditations on the heavens, then to Solomon, who used it in the building of the temple and in his mastery over spirits, and so the book stands as a golden thread through sacred history. Reminder that the alphabet of Raziel is not confined to any one epoch but accompanies humanity through all its trials, offering wisdom in every age. And when in medieval times the book re-emerged, it was embraced by mystics who saw in it a bridge between ancient prophecy and contemporary practice, a survival of primordial wisdom that could be used both to ascend to God and to navigate the dangers of exile, and thus the alphabet of Raziel became a symbol of continuity, of the unbroken presence of divine speech across the ages. Indeed, the very form of the alphabet suggests continuity and return, for many of their glyphs are circular or spiral, suggesting cycles rather than lines, returns rather than departures, and this resonates with the idea that creation itself is cyclical, that exile will one day give way to return, that the dispersion of languages at Babel will be healed by the unification of speech at the end of days. And in this sense the alphabet of Raziel is eschatological, pointing not only backward to the origin but forward to the consummation, promising that the confusion of tongues will be healed, that the alphabets of heaven and earth will once again align, that humanity will speak once more with the clarity of Eden, that every soul will remember its letter, and that the great book of creation will be read aloud without obstruction, and so the study of the alphabet becomes a foretaste of redemption and anticipation of the time when the whole cosmos will be transparent to divine speech. The visual contemplation of Raziel's alphabets was often accompanied by vocal practices, by the chanting of names, the intoning of syllables, the vibration of sounds that correspond to letters, and this reveals another dimension of the book, that the alphabets are not merely visual but auditory, not merely written but sung, that they are modes of vibration as much as shapes on a page, and the adept who chants them enters into resonance with the vibrations that sustain the cosmos, aligning breath with breath, voice with voice, sound with sound, until the boundary between human and divine speech dissolves and the chanter realizes that his own breath is a spark of the divine breath, his own voice a ripple of the divine voice, his own alphabet a reflection of Raziel's alphabet, and this realization is transformative, filling the soul with awe and humility, with joy and longing, with the knowledge that every word spoken is sacred, every syllable an echo of creation, every breath a participation in the divine utterance. Thus the Sefer Raziel Hamelach is not only a book to be studied but a practice to be lived, a way of orienting oneself toward the world as divine language, a way of reading creation as scripture, a way of speaking with care, of listening with reverence, of perceiving the alphabet of Raziel not only in ink and parchment but in stars and rivers, in dreams and visions, in the silent depths of meditation, and in the hidden chambers of the heart, and those who live in this way discover that the world itself becomes luminous, that exile itself becomes suffused with meaning, that even in the darkest night one can read the letters of the divine alphabet written in the sky, that even in suffering one can hear the whisper of Raziel reminding that nothing is outside the speech of God, that every moment is inscribed in the eternal book, and that to awaken to this is already to be redeemed. Raziel's wisdom continues to unfold. The seeker realizes that the alphabets of the book are not merely relics of an ancient revelation but ongoing emanations of divine speech continually flowing into the world, so that every generation receives Raziel's book anew, not only as ink and parchment but as inspiration, as vision, as the sudden intuition that all things are letters and that the world itself is a scroll being unrolled before the eyes of the soul, and thus the study of Raziel is never finished. For each moment the alphabets shift, refract, and reveal new facets of meaning, like a jewel catching light from different angles, and this endlessness is itself part of their power, for they remind the contemplative that the infinite cannot be exhausted, that God's speech is without end, that creation is a ceaseless conversation in which we are invited to participate. The Book of Raziel, therefore, is not so much a fixed manual as it is an invitation into dialogue, a beckoning into the mystery of language, where every attempt to comprehend leads to deeper wonder and every name pronounced opens into new names, and every alphabet studied reveals further alphabets hidden beneath, and so the seeker learns humility, realizing that mastery is an illusion, that the true posture before the alphabet of Raziel is not possession but participation, not control, but communion, not conquest but listening, for the letters are alive, and to engage them is to enter into relationship with living beings of flame and breath. In this recognition the seeker recalls that Raziel himself is the angel of secrets, the one who hears the words of God spoken to the inner council of heaven, the one who records them and conveys them to humanity. Thus the alphabets are not random collections but transcripts of divine speech, traces of conversations that occur beyond the veil, notes taken from the eternal dialogue of the Sefer, and so when one contemplates them one overhears, as it were, the whisperings of heaven, catching fragments of the hidden deliberations that guide creation, and in this overhearing one is changed, for the heart expands, the mind becomes porous, the soul is set aflame with longing, and one begins to walk in the world with new eyes, seeing not only the surface of things, but the script beneath, perceiving every event, every encounter, every joy and sorrow as part of the divine alphabet unfolding in time. The practical applications of Raziel's alphabet, as detailed in the book, reinforce this union of vision and action, for the letters are not only for meditation but for writing on amulets, engraving on rings, inscribing on doorways, placing beneath pillows for dreams, drawing on the body for protection, combining into seals for invocation, and these practices reveal the deep principle that the alphabets are bridges between spirit and matter, that to inscribe a glyph on parchment is to impress divine energy into the material world, that to carry a letter is to carry a spark of heaven, that to gaze upon a seal is to align the imagination with angelic currents, and thus the book teaches that the sacred is not confined to heaven but may be embodied in clay and metal, ink and wax, flesh and bone, that the alphabet of Raziel is a tool for sanctifying the material, for turning the very objects of exile into vessels of light. This sanctification is itself a reversal of exile, a taste of Eden restored. Yet even as the book reveals these practical uses, it continually warns of the danger of misuse, for the letters are fiery and the names potent, and without purity of intention the same practices that heal may harm, the same seals that protect may attract peril, the same invocations that open gates to angels may open gates to destructive forces, and so the Sefer Raziel insists on preparation, on prayer, on humility, on aligning one's will with the divine will, before attempting to wield the alphabets, reminding the seeker that these are not tools for personal gain but gifts for the sake of communion, not technologies for control but sacraments of relationship, and those who forget this, who approach with arrogance or greed, find themselves burned by the very fire they sought to command, while those who approach with awe and love find themselves illuminated, healed, uplifted. As the seeker advances, the alphabets begin to reveal deeper correspondences, showing themselves not only in the diagrams of the book but in the very structure of nature, the spiral of shells, the branching of trees, the movement of clouds, the constellations of stars. All of these begin to appear as extensions of Raziel's script, and the adept realizes that the world is saturated with letters, that nothing is without significance, that every shape is a glyph, every sound a syllable, every motion a sentence in the cosmic text, and to live with this awareness is to inhabit a universe alive with meaning, to walk in a world where nothing is random, nothing is wasted, nothing is mute, where all things speak if one knows how to listen, and the listening itself becomes prayer, the perception itself becomes invocation, the awareness itself becomes union. At this stage the seeker also comes to perceive the role of silence, for the alphabets of Raziel are not only letters of sound but also letters of silence, gaps between utterances, spaces between strokes, voids that give form to presence, and in contemplating them one learns that creation is woven of both speech and silence, presence and absence, revelation and concealment, and that to truly hear the alphabet one must listen not only to the letters spoken but to the spaces between them, to the pauses pregnant with meaning, to the silence in which the divine breath rests, and in this silence one discovers the hidden name, the name beyond names, the alphabet that cannot be written, the word that cannot be spoken, and this discovery is the culmination of Raziel's teaching, the recognition that the alphabets are ladders leading upward to the ineffable, and that beyond the letters there is the word itself, unmediated, beyond form, beyond sound, beyond even angelic revelation, the word that is God. The medieval mystics who treasured the Sefer Raziel understood this, which is why they often place the book not only in their libraries, but at their bedsides, in their homes, under their pillows, as if to say that the alphabet of Raziel is not to be confined to study, but is to infuse daily life, to guard the threshold between waking and sleeping, between day and night, between life and death, and in doing so they made their lives into extensions of the book, living texts inscribed with angelic letters, walking alphabets of Raziel, and this tradition continued, so that in every age, those who turn to Raziel's book are invited to become living pages of it, to embody its wisdom not only in thought but in action, not only in speech but in silence, not only in ritual but in love, until the distinction between book and reader dissolves entirely and one realizes that to read Raziel is to become Raziel, to hear the secret is to become the secret, to inscribe the letter is to be the letter. And in this transformation exile is ended, for one no longer seeks to return to Eden as if to a distant place, but recognizes that Eden has always been within, inscribed in the alphabet of the soul, waiting only to be read. The seeker remains immersed in the current of Raziel's transmission. The recognition dawns that the alphabet itself is not a mere instrument of communication, but a ladder of transformation, for every letter is both a key and a gate, both a symbol and a living force, and to pass through it is to be reshaped by it, to be inscribed upon by the very glyph one contemplates, so that study is never neutral but always transformative, marking the soul with the fire of the letter, engraving the spirit with the shape of the name, and this engraving is what the mystics called the writing of the heart, the hidden Torah written not on stone but on flesh, not on parchment but on the soul, and Raziel's alphabet is its model, the primordial engraving from which all later engravings derive. Indeed, the book teaches that the letters themselves are etched into the heavens, that the constellations are strokes of the divine quill, that the stars themselves are sparks of ink scattered across the black parchment of the night, and to gaze upward is to read a celestial scroll, a cosmic Sefer Raziel in which the alphabets blaze with living light, and the soul that reads them rightly enters into the music of the spheres, harmonizing with the angelic choirs that sing creation into being. The more the seeker contemplates, the more it becomes clear that the alphabet of Raziel is inseparable from the rhythms of time, for the book not only arranges letters and diagrams but also assigns them to days of the week, to watches of the night, to hours ruled by different angels, to the cycles of the moon and the dance of the planets, and thus the alphabets are temporal as much as spatial, revealing that time itself is inscribed with letters, that every moment bears a glyph comma, every hour a syllable, every day a word in the sentence of history, and so to live according to the Sefer Raziel is to live in awareness of sacred timing, to act not randomly, but in consonance with the alphabet that rules the moment, to pray at the hour when the name is open, to invoke at the season when the letter shines, to enter into harmony with the liturgy of time, and by so doing to weave one's life into the greater sentence of creation, becoming not a discordant utterance but a consonant one, not noise but speech, not exile but homecoming. This sense of alignment extends further, for the alphabets are said to correspond not only to cosmic cycles, but also to the inner anatomy of the human being, with certain letters governing the organs, others the limbs, others the senses, and thus the body itself is revealed as a scroll, a microcosm of the larger book, and to heal the body is to restore the proper balance of letters, to realign the alphabet within, and this is why the Sefer Raziel contains instructions for using names and alphabets in healing, for to pronounce the right sequences, to call the letters back into harmony, to restore the inner scroll to its pristine order, and thus the healer becomes a scribe of the body, writing health into flesh by arranging the divine letters in prayer, chant, and visualization. In this way, medicine and mysticism are united, body and spirit are bound together, for both are written in the same alphabet, both are sustained by the same word, and to perceive this is to recognize that no illness is merely physical and no healing merely spiritual, but all are linguistic, all are matters of inscription and articulation, all are governed by the alphabet of Raziel that permeates the cosmos and the soul alike. The seeker also learns, through Raziel's alphabet, that creation is layered, with worlds within worlds, each sustained by its own set of letters, its own alphabet of being, and that to ascend spiritually is to move from one alphabet to another, from grosser to subtler scripts, from visible to invisible inscriptions, until one reaches the innermost alphabet, the primordial Aleph, the silent breath from which all letters emerge, and here one stands at the threshold of the ineffable, beholding the source from which even Raziel receives his wisdom, the fountain of speech from which angels drink, the hidden Torah that existed before creation, inscribed not on scrolls but in the infinite mind of God. And to touch this is to realize that all alphabets, all names, all books are but veils and vessels, shadows and reflections of the one infinite word, and that the task of the seeker is not to cling to the letters but to let them guide upward, to use them as ladders, as boats, as wings, until one is carried beyond them into the silence of the source, where the soul itself becomes a letter, a spark of the eternal speech, and rests in the embrace of the infinite. Yet even in this exalted realization, the seeker does not abandon the alphabets, for they are the means by which this very realization is possible, and upon returning from silence into speech one finds renewed reverence for them, cherishing each glyph, each name, each diagram as a gift, a sacrament of presence, a trace of the divine offered in love, and thus one becomes a guardian of the alphabet, preserving it for others, teaching it to disciples, transmitting it, as Raziel transmitted it, not as a possession to be hoarded but as a revelation to be shared, always with humility, always with warning, always with the reminder that these letters are fire and must be approached with care, that they are light and must be shielded from misuse, that they are life and must be cherished with awe. In this guardianship the seeker fulfills the role of Adam, Noah, Abraham, Solomon, and all the saints who bore Raziel's book, becoming another link in the chain, another page in the scroll, another witness to the eternal alphabet that binds heaven and earth. The seeker contemplates more deeply, it becomes evident that the alphabets of Raziel function as mirrors, reflecting both the cosmos and the inner landscape of the soul, so that every glyph corresponds to a divine attribute and aspect of the human psyche, and a cosmic principle. And in perceiving these correspondences, the adept comes to see that there is no part of existence outside the script, no corner of reality unmarked by the divine hand, and thus every encounter, every sensation, every fleeting thought is potentially a letter, every action potentially a word, every relationship potentially a sentence, and the challenge of the mystic is to read these letters correctly, to assemble them into harmony, to allow the alphabet to guide behavior, perception, and thought. For to misread the letters is to misalign oneself with creation, and to align with them is to participate in the ongoing act of divine speech, the continuous unfolding of reality according to the word, in which angels, humans, and all beings play their parts as letters in the eternal script. The Sefer Raziel Hamelach further teaches that the alphabets are not merely visual or conceptual but have energetic properties, that each stroke carries vibration, that the curves and angles of the letters resonate with the forces of the cosmos, and that by meditating on or tracing them, one tunes the body, mind, and soul to these vibrations, awakening latent faculties, expanding consciousness, and attuning perception to subtler realities, so that what appears as ordinary life is revealed as multi-layered text, rich with meaning, a living manuscript in which angels walk, the stars speak, and the hidden currents of God's speech flow beneath the surface, waiting for those who can read. This also explains the tradition of chanting the names derived from these alphabets, for the sound itself is a channel, a river of energy flowing from the letters into the practitioner, harmonizing the body with the soul with the cosmos, and in the resonance of this vocalization the angels themselves may appear, or at least their influence may be felt, transforming the consciousness of the practitioner and illuminating the deeper currents of creation. The book emphasizes that the alphabets are keys to knowledge that is simultaneously hidden and revealed, for each letter contains a microcosm of wisdom, and their combinations form patterns that unlock layers of insight, teaching the practitioner not merely facts, but a method of seeing, a language of the soul, a code by which the workings of heaven and earth can be intuited. And in this sense the Sefer Raziel is both encyclopedia and pedagogy, containing answers and simultaneously teaching how to ask the right questions, how to perceive the correct correspondences, how to move through the letters as one moves through the hidden chambers of the soul, so that the journey through the alphabets is a journey of self-discovery as well as cosmological revelation, a path of initiation that integrates knowing with being, theory with practice, heaven with earth. Another dimension revealed by the Sefer Raziel is the ethical and spiritual responsibility inherent in engaging with the alphabets, for the power they convey is not neutral, and the book repeatedly cautions that improper use of names and letters can attract harm, disrupt the harmony of the soul, or unbalance natural and celestial forces, and thus every engagement with the alphabet must be preceded by purification, prayer, fasting, study, and reverence, and one must approach it with humility of one who stands before the face of the divine, aware that the letters are alive, conscious in their own way, bearing intelligence and agency, and that the practitioner is entering a covenant with them, promising to wield them, not for selfish gain but for the advancement of harmony, wisdom, and the sanctification of the world. And in this covenant one becomes a co-creator, a partner in the divine articulation of reality, a participant in the ongoing writing of creation. As the practitioner advances, the letters themselves begin to reveal hidden geometries, patterns of symmetry and proportion that correspond not only to angelic hierarchies, but to cosmic structures, elemental forces, and spiritual archetypes, so that the alphabet is experienced simultaneously as sound, shape, energy, and meaning, and to meditate upon it is to enter a multidimensional field in which the distinctions between mind, body, cosmos, and soul dissolve, and one perceives a universe suffused with intelligence and order, a reality that is a living manuscript, an ongoing inscription of God's thought to being, and in this perception the mystic glimpses the unity of all things, the consonance of all creation, the harmony in which letters, names, angels, humans, and stars participate together in the symphony of being, and the alphabet of Raziel is both the score and the instrument through which this music flows. Furthermore, the Sefer Raziel emphasizes the layered nature of the alphabets, revealing that there are multiple planes of reality corresponding to multiple alphabets, each with its own set of letters, each governing a different level of creation, so that the seeker who has mastered one alphabet is prepared to ascend to subtler scripts, encountering forms that are more abstract, more luminous, more potent, and that each level contains the wisdom of the previous one while revealing deeper mysteries, and thus, the journey through the alphabets is a progressive ascent, a ladder of increasing refinement and insight, culminating in the recognition of the primordial alphabet, the source of all letters, the root from which all names emerge, the ineffable script that is the essence of God, and in glimpsing the source, the practitioner experiences a foretaste of union, a momentary participation in the infinite word that sustains all being. Finally, the Sefer Raziel teaches that the ultimate purpose of the alphabet is not power, not mastery, not even knowledge for its own sake, but the restoration of the soul to its divine source, the alignment of human consciousness with the original speech of God, the awakening of the latent letterhood within, and the realization that each person carries within them a spark of the alphabet, a fragment of the word, a living letter that can be cultivated, harmonized, and awakened through meditation, chanting, and contemplation, so that life itself becomes an act of reading and writing the divine script, an ongoing dialogue with angels and God, a continuous unfolding of the eternal manuscript of creation, and thus the seeker discovers that the Sefer Raziel Hamelach is not merely a book to be read but a living reality to be entered, inhabited, and expressed, an infinite text in which the soul itself becomes a letter, a name, a glyph, and participates fully in the sacred writing of the universe, fulfilling the promise of Eden and the vision of Raziel, the angel of secrets, who revealed the alphabets to humanity as both guidance and grace. The seeker remains immersed in the contemplation of Raziel's alphabets. The awareness grows that the letters themselves are active agents of transformation, not passive symbols, for each glyph embodies a spark of divine intelligence, a vibration of the word, a point of intersection between heaven and earth, and as one traces them with the mind, the hand, or the tongue, one participates in the act of creation itself, entering the rhythm of the original speech that called forth light from darkness, waters from void, order from chaos, and thus every meditation, every chant, every tracing of the letter becomes a sacred action, a microcosmic recreation, a reaffirmation of the ongoing articulation of reality, and this realization brings both awe and responsibility, for the practitioner understands that the letters are alive, responsive, and that their alignment, pronunciation, and intention determine the flow of their power, guiding the forces of the cosmos toward blessing or mischief according to the disposition of the soul that engages them. The Sefer Raziel teaches that such engagement requires preparation, that one must purify body, mind, and spirit through fasting, prayer, study, and observance, for only a vessel attuned to the harmonics of creation can carry the currents of the alphabet without distortion, and that these currents, when rightly received, illuminate the mind, sanctify the heart, and awaken latent faculties, bringing insight into hidden structures of time, space, and consciousness, revealing the architecture of the cosmos in its interweaving of letters, names, and angelic orders. Moreover, the alphabets of Raziel are intimately connected to the names of angels, for every name is constructed from letters, and every letter is a condensation of power, so that to pronounce the name correctly is to activate the corresponding currents of energy to align with the angelic presence, and to open the channels that allow divine influence to flow through the practitioner and into the world. And in this sense the book functions as a guide to angelic correspondence, a manual for harmonizing human action with celestial intelligence, and the letters themselves are not mere signs, but living vessels, capable of transmitting the essence of the angel they represent, so that by working with the alphabet, the adept can awaken the presence of the angels within the microcosm of the self, experiencing the alignment of inner and outer worlds, the concordance of personal will with divine intention. The book therefore teaches that the alphabet is simultaneously map, instrument, and presence, that it is both contemplative and operative, that its study cultivates knowledge and character, perception and power, reflection and action, for the letters are alive, and the one who approaches them with humility, love, and reverence becomes attuned to their life, participating in the ongoing maintenance of the cosmos itself. The mystical vision offered by the Sefer Raziel also emphasizes the fractal nature of creation, the recursive unfolding of reality through letters, names, and glyphs, so that patterns observed at one level echo at others, that alphabets governing the heavens resonate in the patterns of the stars, that alphabets governing the soul resonate in the forms of thought and emotion, that alphabets governing the physical world manifest in the cycles of nature and the structures of matter, and the adept learns to perceive these correspondences, seeing the harmony that unites all things, perceiving the alphabet of God written not only in scripture and in Raziel's diagrams but in the motions of planets, the growth of trees, the ebb and flow of tides, the beat of the human heart, and in recognizing this, one comes to understand that the study of Raziel's alphabet is not an escape from the world but a deep engagement with it, a way of reading its hidden script, of perceiving the sacred inscription in all forms, of participating consciously in the writing of creation. This engagement with the alphabet is further amplified by the practice of meditative visualization, whereby the practitioner imagines each letter as luminous, fiery, fluid, or crystalline, seeing the forms expand, contract, spiral, or pulse, sensing their energy flowing through the body, resonating with thought, breath, and emotion, and in this visualization the letters cease to be abstract symbols and become living presences, guides, and catalysts, shaping consciousness itself, opening channels to angelic insight, aligning perception with divine order, and teaching that the essence of creation is not inert but responsive, that consciousness interacts with the letters, co-creating the experience of reality, and that every meditation upon the alphabet is an act of co-creation, a dialogue between the human soul and the living script of God is revealed by Raziel. Furthermore, the Sefer Raziel emphasizes the role of rhythm, chant, and breath, for the alphabet is not only a visual or mental phenomenon but a sonic one, and every letter vibrates with a particular resonance, every name with a particular power, and the practitioner who pronounces them correctly experiences not only insight, but an energetic alignment, a harmonization of body, soul, and cosmos, whereby the very act of speech becomes a ritual, a conduit, a sacred technology connecting the human vessel with angelic realms, and the more one practices, the more subtle the discernment of vibrations becomes, the more precise the correspondence between sound, letter, name, and intention, and in this process the practitioner realizes that language itself is sacred, that every sound made with awareness participates in the cosmic alphabet, and that mastery of letters and names is mastery of alignment, perception, and being itself. The alphabets of Raziel, moreover, teach the principle of layered concealment and revelation, for each glyph contains multiple levels of meaning, some apparent, some hidden, some accessible only to those who have prepared themselves, and thus the study of the Sefer Raziel is iterative, unfolding over years, decades, even a lifetime, each encounter revealing new insights, new correspondences, new angelic presences, new pathways of alignment, so that the book is both timeless and eternal, ever new, ever revealing, and the seeker learns patience, humility, and devotion, realizing that the journey through the alphabet is not a race but a lifelong engagement, a continuous reading of the living scroll of creation, in which the alphabet functions simultaneously as teacher, guide, and mirror, reflecting the evolving state of the soul, illuminating its distortions, amplifying its virtues, and opening it to the fullness of divine speech. Finally, the study of the alphabet culminates in the realization that letters, names, angels, and the cosmos are all manifestations of the one eternal word, that the multiplicity of forms is an expression of a singular source, and that by engaging with the alphabets of Raziel, the practitioner comes to perceive the unity underlying diversity, the infinite reflected in the finite, the eternal vibrating in the temporal, and that this recognition transforms consciousness, allowing one to live in constant awareness of the sacred inscription in all things, to participate consciously in the ongoing articulation of creation, and to embody the alphabet in thought, speech, and action, fulfilling the highest purpose of the Sefer Raziel Hamelach, which is not merely knowledge but communion, not merely study, but transformation, not merely observation, but full participation in the living script of the universe, and thus the practitioner becomes both reader and letter, observer and participant, contemplative, an agent, and in this union the deepest secrets of creation, revealed by the angel Raziel, are lived, realized, and expressed in the ongoing unfolding of existence itself. The seeker journeys further into the depths of Raziel's teaching. It becomes increasingly evident that the ultimate purpose of the alphabet is union, union with the divine, union of the self with the cosmos, union of heaven and earth, for the letters are not merely symbols to be studied but living conduits through which the infinite pours into the finite, and the finite reflects the infinite back, creating a continuous circuit of presence, recognition, and transformation, and in this circuit the soul discovers that every moment is already inscribed, every breath already named, every thought already written in the eternal manuscript, and that by attuning to the alphabets, by meditating upon the letters, by chanting the names, by tracing the glyphs in the imagination, the body, and the material world, one participates consciously in the unfolding of creation, becoming both witness and agent, both page and reader, both instrument and song, and in this recognition exile dissolves, duality collapses, and the separated self is absorbed into the cosmic script, the divine word, and the living alphabet of Raziel itself. The Sefer Raziel Hamelach thus offers a vision in which all levels of existence, material, mental, spiritual, and celestial, are interwoven through letters and names, a lattice of sacred communication, a grid of divine speech that orders the heavens, governs the angels, structures time, animates nature, and shapes the soul. And the practitioner who engages faithfully with these alphabets learns to perceive reality as a living text, to read its patterns, to respond with wisdom, to act in harmony, and recognize that the act of reading, speaking, writing, and meditating is inseparable from being, that every engagement with the letters is simultaneously an act of creation, healing, alignment, and worship, for the alphabet is itself an expression of the eternal, and every letter contains the spark of the infinite word, which is God, which is life, which is light, and which is the ultimate secret that Raziel imparts to humanity. Furthermore, the practitioner discovers that these letters are not only conduits of knowledge and power, but also mirrors of the inner state, reflecting virtues and vices, purity and impurity, clarity and confusion, so that the study of the alphabet becomes a path of self-discovery, ethical refinement, and spiritual maturation, for one cannot successfully engage the letters without cultivating humility, patience, devotion, love, and discernment, and the letters themselves guide the soul in developing these qualities, acting as both teacher and est, revealing the readiness of the aspirant, opening doors for those prepared, closing them for those unready, and thus the alphabet functions as both gatekeeper and guide, as both map and territory, as both wisdom and practice, leading the adept ever closer to the realization and of unity with the divine. The alphabets of Raziel also reveal a profound interconnectedness between sound, form, and meaning, demonstrating that the universe is composed not only of matter and energy but of language, that the cosmos is fundamentally scriptural, that creation itself is the expression of the divine word, and that by understanding the structure and vibration of letters, one begins to perceive the underlying grammar of existence, the syntax of time, the poetry of space, the music of the spheres, and in this perception, one participates consciously in the ongoing articulation of reality, becoming attuned to the rhythms of creation, aligning personal intention with cosmic harmony, and opening oneself to the flow of divine energy, which animates every being, guides every event, and sustains every world. In the culmination of this practice, the practitioner perceives that the alphabets are simultaneously external and internal, cosmic and personal, angelic and human, visible and invisible, and that the distinction between the observer and the observed dissolves, so that every letter seen externally is simultaneously a letter inscribed upon the soul, every name pronounced externally resonates within the heart, and every diagram traced upon the page mirrors a pattern within consciousness. And in this realization, the practitioner experiences the profound unity of all things, recognizing that the alphabet of Raziel is not merely a tool for knowledge or power, but the very structure of existence itself, the living grid of divine speech that interconnects all levels of reality, and that to engage with it consciously is to step fully into participation with creation, to act with awareness, to speak with reverence, to live with sacred intention, and to embody the infinite word in every thought, action, and breath. Thus, the Sefer Raziel Hamelach, with its alphabets, names, diagrams, and secrets, offers a path that is simultaneously contemplative, operative, mystical, and practical, revealing the living presence of the angel Raziel who transmits divine wisdom to humanity, offering guidance in exile, instruction in harmony, insight into hidden realities, protection against spiritual and material peril, and ultimately the means to recognize the eternal alphabet written within every soul, to hear the unspoken word echoing through creation, and to become a living participant in the continuous writing of the universe, embodying the letters, resonating with the names, attuning to the angels, and awakening to the infinite word, so that the ultimate truth of Raziel's revelation is realized, that all existence is script, All beings are letters, all moments are words, and the human soul, by awakening to the alphabet, aligns with the eternal, becoming both reader and letter, witness and participant, servant and co-creator, and in this union with the divine alphabet, the highest mysteries of creation are lived, known and expressed, fulfilling the promise of the angel Raziel and the eternal book he gave to humanity, a book that is not merely read but entered, inhabited, and realized as living, breathing, infinite speech, and thus the study and contemplation of the Sefer Raziel Hamelach becomes the practice of walking in harmony with the word, living within the alphabet, and perceiving all existence as the sacred, ongoing articulation of God's eternal, infinite, and luminous speech.